Hey, Amy,
Yeah, Juan?
give me that beat.
It's Baseball Shangri-La with Amy Cuevas and Juan Ramirez.
And welcome to another episode of Baseball Shangri-La. She is Amy Cuevas, and I am Juan Ramirez. Uh, Look, if this is the first time you're coming across us on YouTube, now's a perfect time to go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get updates because we're still trying to figure out our schedule, right, Amy? We have a tendency to drop episode in bunches.
I mean, that's how it's been working out lately. So, hey, you guys are going to get content one way or another. Bunches, a couple times a week. We're getting there.
For those of you who are listening on the audio, also don't forget to follow us on the social media so you can get notifications of when we are going to be dropping episodes. If not, subscribe on the audio portion because then you'll get notified automatically when we drop episodes. Again, on social media, you guys can follow us on X at BB Shangri-La. On Instagram, Threads, and Twitch, we are Baseball Shangri-La. We got a lot we want to cover here. Before we get to our base running blunders, Amy, how are you?
I'm good. Long weekend? How are you?
Fantastic. I thought of you this weekend, Amy. And before we get into the show, I want to ask you this on because I want to get your genuine reaction to you. If you guys have been watching the show on a regular basis, you're getting to know us, and you'll know that Amy has a love for really bad movies. Like she loves bad movies. And there happens to be a movie that was released this past weekend that is just getting horrible reviews, and people are saying it is one of the worst movies ever. So before we get into the show, Amy, have you heard of Madam Web? And do you have any intention of watching Madam Web?
I had not heard of it. It was not on my list, but it sounds like if I need to hold my crown for bad movies, I might need to look into this. Uh, are you going to be watching it just
Well,
to scoff at it or
I don't know if I'm going to see it in the theater, but I've just it's one of those movies. It's been getting awful reviews. It's in the Spider-Man world. It's characters. They're peripheral characters to Spider-Man. Um, but there's just been all this reaction on Twitter
Wait a
about
minute.
how
This
bad
is
it
the
is.
one with all the gals, right? Is
Yes,
it
Dakota
is it 'cause
Johnson.
it had really bad reviews, or is it 'cause it's a bunch of gals?
No, I think there are certain people that talk about movies whose opinion I trust. So
Okay.
I think actually they're saying the girls are probably the best part of the movie, like the performances. The thing is, they say the script is terrible, the editing is terrible. Like people have, and I don't know if any of these clips are real that they're putting on social media, but it does look like it's horrible. But being that you are the defender of Jaws 3, I was just curious if you were going to go partake in this Madam Web because I think it's going to become kind of like Showgirls now, where like Showgirls is so notoriously bad, but it's become this cult favorite. Or like the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I think the Rocky Horror Picture Show is a horrible movie. And
I'm gonna have
but
to give it 5 years or so then, because I prefer some of the older movies, as you can tell, with Jaws 3, Basketball. I don't know if Zoolander really falls in horrible movies, but I
no,
love that
I
one.
wouldn't say it. No,
Okay,
no.
highly quotable, Hook. I know that's not really on your list, but
I will say one of our listeners, Anthony Couturier, came to your defense and said, Hook, it's not great, it's not good, but it's not in Jaws 3 level. So I think that's
not
where
much
you lose.
is.
I think that's where you lose people, Amy, is with your love of Jaws 3.
To be fair, just a little background. When I was a young kidlet, I wanted to be a shark biologist. That was what I wanted to be when I grew up. So there weren't a lot of shark movies, shark documentaries back then. It predated Discovery's Shark Week when it was actually good. Um, and so Jaws 3 was it was another shark movie that I could watch. So I partially just love it because there is a shark in it.
And there you go. The more you know. Do, do,
Do,
do.
do, do.
All right, let's get on to it. Base running blunders. This is the segment of the show. We usually like to start the show with this segment, and that's where we correct any mistakes that we made on previous shows. Amy, do we have any base running blunders that we need to address?
Not any on my list and none that have been brought to my attention, so we might be in the clear as we start this episode. What about
All
you?
right. Fabulous. I have not heard anything, so we're off to a good start. So let's get a quick update on some of the stories that we've listened that we talked about in our past episode. And there was one update that we got on actually on our most recent episode where we're talking about this gondola that is going to be taking fans into Dodger Stadium. There was a big update over the weekend that I found interesting because Amy, you and I were both talking about this on that episode where our one of the big concerns that we had was housing, affordable housing, how building this gondola was going to impact affordable housing. Well, it turns out then over the weekend, the mayor of Los Angeles, Mayor Karen Bass, uh, basically had said that in order well look, I'm summarizing here and this is all up in the air. Amy's going to give us the meat and potatoes here, but this is what caught my attention was that Karen Bass had said in exchange for a yes vote on the Dodger Stadium gondola, uh, they would need to have affordable housing, and that is housing being built on Dodger Stadium parking lots. Now, Amy's going to clarify this, but basically, there is a clause there that if they develop any of the land, the parking lots, and that's the stuff, that's the part that McCourt owns. If they develop any of that land, they have to put affordable housing on there. Now, before I throw it to you, Amy, of course, there's the irony of homes being built on Dodger Stadium land. We can't ignore the obvious there. But one of the other things that I thought was interesting is that they have 5 votes right now, and they keep rescheduling this vote because they don't have the votes right now. They don't have the votes to pass this. So they have 5 and they need 7. And there's going to be another board meeting this Thursday about it. So I'm curious to see if there's any leverage. The fact that this story came out over the weekend before this board meeting on Thursday, is that shenanigans, Amy?
A little bit. I'm going to try to remain as impartial as I can, but a lot of the headlines you're alluding to, some of them have a little bit more detail, but a lot of them are just quoting, the demand for affordable housing could derail Dodger Stadium's gondola project, and I think that that is misleading. So, to your point, Thursday, February 22nd at 10 a.m., they are going to meet in front of the full Metro board. So last week, the committee moved forward with no recommendation, and so that's why it's going before the full board. They're going to vote on item 12 and 12.1, which are the project, and then the environmental impact report. So what you're referring to, Mayor Karen Bass, they actually have a list of 31 conditions, and you guys can see the whole list. It's up on the internet. There's quite a few that I kind of want to just address, but the one that you're referring to, the way that the headlines are proposing it, it makes it sound like maybe affordable housing now. Some of them are referring to like future developments on the lot, but it really comes down to if anybody decides to do any lot development at Dodger Stadium, it would require city approval. And basically, Mayor Bass wants a binding commitment that at least 25% of any future developments would be for affordable housing. So, to be clear, it's not affordable housing now, it's not affordable housing later. It's if anything gets developed on the actual Dodger Stadium lot. So I think that can be a little bit misleading depending on what headline you guys are seeing, if it's just going by on your timeline.
See,
Um,
this is the thing that kills me about affordable housing, right? And it happens in the cities, right? They build these apartment complexes. I mean, we have no better example than what's going on in downtown LA with that empty building that they didn't even finish building, that they have graffiti and people are literally jumping off that is they get these permits to build these complexes, right? And they're told you got to have affordable housing in it. So what does that mean? So you could have a building that maybe has 80 units and they make 5 of those units affordable housing. And that's how they get away with this shit. Like the rest of those, nobody else can afford to live in those units, right? But because they have 5 of those units are affordable housing, right? And that's how they get away with it, right? It's like, oh, okay, but you got to make part of the building, you got to make those units affordable housing. And I just feel, and maybe, that's just me being cynical, that they will find the least number of units that they can get away with to make them affordable housing. And the fact, and I always, when McCourt bought the Dodgers, I always thought he was going to develop that land behind there in the ravine. And they were. I mean, there were reports that they not only were they going to build housing there, but they were going to turn it kind of like into the Grove. I don't know what you would call that. Kind of like there would be shopping centers and stuff like that. And it's just heartbreaking to me that that's what's going to happen here when you have the history of Chavez Ravine there, that those people will run off that land so they can build Dodger Stadium. And now you're going to end up putting housing that no low income people are going to be able to afford. And that's how you're going to sell it. Look, you're going to have the overview. You're going to have Dodger Stadium in your view.
Well, that's actually one of the points is some of the development. I mean, some of these towers they're saying that they're going to be 90-foot tall towers. So some of these are going up right in front of people's homes. Like they're talking about, there's actually like a mini documentary on YouTube that Eric Kelly made called Stopping the Gondola. And they're showing like a view of the skyline, and they're saying this view is going to change because you'll have the gondolas not only running through this state park, but like this is what you're going to see, and it's going up in front of people's houses. So I think kind of going back to the headlines thing, like I think that affordable housing is an important topic, but I feel like it's misleading amongst some of the other 31 conditions that are being put out there. I think some of those also we should be focusing on that too. So they have there's still no evidence for traffic reduction. So they don't have a report for that. We still don't have a financial report of who's paying for this. They are saying that it's estimated, again, $500 million for construction. It could be up to $10 million a year for operation costs. So without having a plan for any of that stuff, like who's going to foot the bill? But really, some of the other things that came out with that were that the Zero Emissions Transit, the company that would be doing this in conjunction with McCourt, they need to set aside a pool of money to ensure that sufficient funds are available to dismantle this or to operate it if something goes wrong, so that it does not fall on taxpayers. So it's not just things for like affordable housing in the future that are going to hold up this bill. There are 31 other conditions here. Some of the other ones, there was number 17 was that zero emissions transit can't benefit from the use of eminent domain. They have to give fair market value to people for their houses, which is a great line to have in a document, but we've seen how that actually plays out in real life, and people don't get the fair market value for their house. They're probably going to get the lowest amount. Like if you get Kelley Blue Book, you're not going to get the high dollar, you're going to get the low dollar for your car. So it just, I guess the bottom line for me and everything that I'm reading and all of these videos that I've seen of the actual committee meeting last week, the community doesn't want it. It's going to be an eyesore. It's going to be a lot of noise pollution, especially in underserved communities. And I don't know that it's necessarily solving ingress and egress into the stadium because, again, we don't really have a plan for that. And people are still going to be parking at Union Station or on the streets of Chinatown. So unless you're going to actually solve for where people are going, you still have the traffic getting to the stadium. All you've solved is just a little bit of people getting in. And like you said, you're probably not going to write it. I'm not going to write it. They don't have a report of how many people. They just have a projection of what they think people will do because they'll like the novelty of it. But are people actually going to ride this in numbers that justify the multiple millions of dollars? And the community doesn't want it. It's impacting a community for Dodger Stadium games when we could actually just invest more in the Dodger Stadium Express and have cleaner solutions that way. And I just, the people in Chinatown, Echo Park, Solano Canyon, Lincoln Heights, these are the people who are impacted by this. These are the people who are going to have to live with this every day for what? I mean, I love going to Dodger Stadium, but I don't want to impact a community so that I can get in there when we have other solutions, and it's been proven so far, or alleged, that they haven't actually researched these other solutions. What would happen if they did expand the Dodger Stadium Express? And so without that in play, I my heart goes out to the community because they truly don't want this.
Look, guys, I know there was Walker Buehler news, there's Dodgers camp news. We're gonna get to all of that. We wanted to give you guys an update. We said this is an ongoing story. We're gonna continue to cover this story because this is important. And I feel like I smell shenanigans here. When I saw and I read that, like, they have 5 votes already and Karen Bass is negotiating through the public, that it my ears perked up there because I felt, oh, there's shenanigans going on here to get those other 2 votes. So we will continue to monitor this story as Rachel Maddow says, watch this space. Before we move on to another story that caught my eye, Amy, anything else on the gondola that you want to share with our audience?
No, just depending on, which side you fall on, there is going to be that meeting, and again, that's on February 22nd at 10 a.m. So, for those interested, yeah, I'm sure you can find more information on the internet.
On the worldwide interwebs.
Yes.
Okay, so there was another story that caught my eye, Amy, and I'm wondering if you saw this, but the owner of the Arizona Diamondbacks, Ken Kendrick, started talking about the possibility of the Diamondbacks leaving Arizona. This is a direct quote from the owner of the Diamondbacks. There are opportunities available. It's not where we are spending time or energy. We may run out of time in Phoenix. We hope that won't happen. Now, this is coming on the heels of what's going on in Oakland. Like, there was this period where everyone thought the Oakland A's going to Las Vegas was a done deal. Now you're hearing stories that, well, it's not a done deal. The mayor of Las Vegas just recently backtracked. So I have no clue. Jeff Passan of ESPN was going on there telling people, hey, dude, this deal can go bad, and what caught my eye about this, Amy, and I wanted to, did the Oakland A's moving, because that was approved 30-0, right? Did the Oakland A's moving open a can of worms? Because I don't think we've seen this in Major League Baseball in quite some time. I think it's been years. I think obviously you had the Montreal situation, when the Nationals going to Washington, D.C. It just seemed like this is something that I feel like is more connected with the NFL, where you see cities that are trying to leverage other cities to get the public to build them a new stadium. Like, for the longest time, before the Rams moved back and the Chargers moved to LA, every city was using Los Angeles as, like, well, we can go to LA and they can build us a stadium out in LA. And I feel like this is new to baseball.
I
At
feel like
least it's
we're in
been,
in any given Sunday again.
yeah, it's like it's been a long time since we've seen this in baseball. So that's what caught my eye, was the fact that, okay, now Oakland's doing this. How many other teams now in Major League Baseball, especially in small markets, are going to want to get, like, they're going to use this to try to get what they want out of it? And I know that maybe, the Diamondbacks had the TV deal with Bally, and that bankrupted them. Bally's went bankrupt, so they're losing TV money here.
And their lease
So,
expires on Chase Field at the end of the 2027 season. So they got to figure something out too.
yeah, so Amy, how do you feel about using public funds to build sports stadiums or sports arenas?
Oh man, that's a mixed bag because on the one hand, like they are profiting from this. So like why do you need public dollars for it? But at the same time, can they be expected to bankroll the whole thing? There was something that Ken Kendrick said that I don't know if it's how true it is, but basically because they are seeking help, they're saying that they're willing to throw in hundreds of millions of dollars towards this, But essentially, I guess Arizona passed a state bill in 2021, and that allowed the Diamondbacks to establish a ballpark tax to help offset the cost to do the renovations if they were to stay in Chase Field. But Kendricks is saying that essentially they just didn't want to tax the fans, which I appreciate. Like, I don't want that passed on to me. But even if you have, the city paying for it, the county, whoever, you're still getting public funds. So one way or another, somebody's getting taxed. How do you how do you break even in that respect? Do you expect the owners to pay for that outright? Is that something that they should be sustaining because that is essentially the home of where their players are at? Or, do you expect the public, because they are going there to foot part of that bill? And how much do they have to pay for?
Well, you know what? That's a very interesting question because you have Stan Kroenke, the owner of the Rams, and he paid for SoFi all by himself. Now, Stan Kroenke can do that. He has that kind of money. He has FU money that he can go ahead and build a stadium. There is a part of me that feels that it should be maybe 50-50, that some public funds should be used, but that the owner should also put in his own money to build this. The reason why I feel like the public, and I will put this caveat in it: if you're gonna use public funds, then that means, and this I'm sure is probably a deal breaker, but you kind of have to open up the books then to the public. They need to know, all right, well, how much money are you making? And I don't know if the Green Bay Packers have this where everybody can see this. And I know that the NFL is a different animal. But being like this happened in San Diego, right? Like they wanted the city to build the stadium, to pay for the stadium, to pay for the stadium. And that was on the Chargers side. Now, when Petco was built, I think they used public funds for Petco. But correct me if I'm wrong on that. We'll go back. If that's a base running blunder, we will correct it there. But in those situations, because it feels like I'm losing the word for it, but like I feel a sports team, I don't think civic responsibility is the correct word, but it feels like a sports team belongs to a city, and therefore what the owner's job is, they're just the steward of it. They're there to manage it, they're there to carry it, but the real owners of the team are the city. And maybe that's just too much of a romantic ideal on my part. And
How do you work in that symbiotic relationship though? Like, how much control does the city have over the stadium itself that team is then, using? Are they leasing it from them? Because this is a little bit out of my realm. I don't study the stadium procedures in this respect. So you might teach me something here, but I mean, are they essentially going, if it is public funds, are they going to be leasing some of that back to them or from them? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because is it better off to be like Kroenke, where you paid for everything, so you can do whatever you want, you own all of that, right? But to have teams like let's say if the Diamondbacks end up moving and leaving, yeah, not everybody in Phoenix, not everybody in that area are baseball fans or Diamondbacks fans, but I do feel bad that the same way I feel for those people in Oakland who are diehard Oakland A's fans, and now they lose their baseball team. If they want to go to a baseball game, they're going to have to go to San Francisco.
Well, LA fans know what that feels like with the Raiders and the Rams leaving, coming back. Like, it doesn't feel good to lose your team. Like, nobody wants that.
Yeah, and so this whole talk of expansion with Manfred, I mean, Salt Lake City and Nashville seem to be the two cities that keep coming up. And again, if you have the situation that you have in Tampa, and now the Diamondbacks are basically hinting at the fact that it's like, hey, we want a new stadium, we want the city to put up for it. It's like, why don't we solve those problems before we expand? Like, if those teams cannot be supported, and I have a hard time believing that the Diamondbacks can't be supported in Phoenix, because every time the Dodgers play in Phoenix, that stadium is packed. Yeah, it's packed with Dodger fans, but
Hey, we're still paying. We're still paying to get in there, whatever that cost is. And those tickets are going to be a little more cost prohibitive. The games that Dodgers are there, the Dodgers fans. So I think it's interesting just because Manfred wants to potentially have this as his part of his legacy when he leaves, when he steps down in 2029. I still stand by what I said a couple episodes ago. I don't think we need expansion teams. We need to fix what we have right now. That includes the teams that don't have stadiums that are functioning right now, that need renovations or are just in such bad disrepair that they need something. And if they can't get public funding, then we need a better solution to either hold the owners accountable or figure out how to get those public funds and do like a 50-50, like you said. But also just the teams, like there are some that aren't moving, but are still, taking funds from that CBT fund and not doing anything with it. So we have way bigger problems than expanding the league and adding 2 more teams to that problem.
Yeah, and maybe it's not 50-50. Maybe it's 80-20. 80 comes from the owner, 20 comes from the public. But there's just got to be, like I said this on prior episodes, I think there's too many teams in Major League Baseball, but we are now in a point where I'm sure the players union is not going to, like, I believe the correct term is retraction, but or is it when you take something away, is it retraction or oh wow, I'm showing my ignorance
I
here.
know what you're talking about, but I cannot.
Contraction.
Sure.
All right. Wow. All right. We already know we got a base running blunder for next year. For the next. But I think it's contraction when you actually are thinking of taking teams out of the league. And
I don't think we need to take them out of the league. I think we can keep it at 30. I know you're unhappy with the number. I don't think it's great. I'm not happy with the way that the wild card is being handled right now. But I think expanding, as we know, prices go up, inflation, all that stuff, it rarely tends to come down. So I think that just goes back to your point. We're probably not going to see the teams shrink from 30, but I don't think we need to jump to 32 just yet. I think that's a preemptive move. When we have a lot of other issues that need to be fixed within the league before we even jump to, hey, let's bring in 2 more to this cluster, whatever we have going on.
Yeah, these are just things that I think that Manfred, I think, is aware of, and they're keeping an eye on, because if these TV deals start looking more like the Bally's, baseball's going to have a money problem. Even though people, are going to the ballpark, but a lot of these teams, they depend on revenue from TV. And
the Diamondbacks don't even have their TV situation settled. They're about to start their spring training games and they don't know how they're broadcasting yet. Like that's a problem.
Yeah, and Major League Baseball had to take over the Padres broadcasting duties last year. So again, for me, these are just updates of ongoing stories, things that we wanted to address. We'll keep an eye on. As again, tip of the hat to Rachel Maddow. Watch this space. Let's get into some baseball talk, because there was actual baseball news here with the Dodgers during spring training. And let's go to the update desk with Amy. Amy, any quick just camp updates that you want to share with us?
Yeah, they mentioned today that so for the Seoul series, we're probably going to see Glasnow and Yamamoto as the starters for those games. Doc did mention today for the spring training game that our first one that will be happening on Thursday, the 22nd, that we don't know the starter just yet, but that Grove and Stone will probably pitch a couple innings in that game. And then I believe Max Muncy has been getting some high praise from some of his infielders. Just basically, he was saying he's been focused on his health in the offseason. He's trying to be more mobile, more flexible. But Doc was saying that basically no one's been more frustrated than Muncy with his defensive issues in the last year than Max himself. But he's in great shape. People are saying, they're raving about him, and they believe that he can be an above average third baseman this year. So we'll see how that shakes out.
What's interesting about that to me is, first of all, I think Yamamoto and Glasnow. Well, I think Yamamoto is probably the worst kept secret. Like, clearly Yamamoto is going to pitch in that career series. Now, I could see them pitching Yamamoto and then maybe going to someone else. for the second game and maybe saving Glass now when they come back to the States. But the fact that they're both going with Yamamoto and Glass now, I think we're going to get to it in a few minutes, but I don't think there's any surprises there because I think clearly everyone sees those guys as their number one and the number two starters in the Dodgers rotation. I always love, we're hopefully, the first spring training game is going to be this Thursday. So we're actually going to have hopefully other things to talk about other than Shohei Ohtani's batting practice, because I know the Shoheis are going to come after me, but it's like, it's getting a little, it's like, really, guys, it's batting practice, man. It's batting practice. So I myself am looking forward to actual games being played so we can have something else to discuss.
Our telenovela is coming back. Yay.
Well, but I always also love that whenever it's the first spring training game, it's always like the end of the rotation guys or relievers that are going to pitch in that first game. You never have like a stud pitching in that first game of spring training. So when they said Michael Grove and Gavin Stone are going to be the ones pitching in that game, I was just like, yeah, it makes sense. Regarding Max Muncy, Amy, I got to ask you this. I don't know who's putting this narrative out that like Max Muncy's in great shape, because for me, putting that out there, and maybe I'm reading too much into this because I have heard other fans say this, that because that Muncy was maybe a little too big and that was affecting his defense. Like, this is a guy who was trying, to play defense. When was he ever a great defender? The year that he played first base, I thought he was very good defensively. But when he played second or when he played third, I know last year was rough for him, but the fact that he's come into shape, I love this. Every spring training, we always hear this guy's in the best shape of his life, is the best shape. I wonder if Muncy is hearing all the chatter about his defense. Or is that me just reading too much into
How
it?
could he not? I mean, you have plenty of people who've been saying it since last year. Like, how could he not hear it? And I think to Doc's point, like, there is going to be no one more frustrated with it than him. Like, take everything that we feel when, there's an error or something happens, he's going to feel it, tenfold. And I think that's some of the humanity in the game that I think sometimes we forget is like, nobody's trying to, Mookie and Freddie aren't trying to blow the postseason. As frustrated as I get when somebody misses a ball, like Max isn't trying to like not catch that ball when it goes by him, but like there's only so much you can humanly do. So, I mean, yeah, he probably did feel frustrated. He probably is hearing all of this stuff. And in his defense, like I've seen him on TV in games, and then I've also seen him in the locker room, and there's no kind way to say it. The TV is not kind to him because when he's in the locker room, he looks like he is in great shape.
Yeah.
And I don't see that on the field on the TV. I don't know if it's just the way he wears his jersey, but when we're standing next to him or we're, interviewing another player in there, that guy's in great shape.
No, that's an excellent point that you bring up, because you're right. He does look bigger on TV, because when the times he looks like just a normal guy when you're in the clubhouse with him. But I also find it interesting that this whole, he's in better physical condition. Whenever I'm very curious to see how it does impact his season, because there was a guy named Prince Fielder who went vegan, right? And he wasn't the same. He wasn't the same when he, changed his diet, and all of a sudden he looked slimmer, right? And even Mookie did this once when I think he stopped eating meat, and he said, it didn't work for him because he started feeling run down towards the end of the season. So I find it interesting that everybody is making a deal about Muncy's physical condition. Okay, if he does lose a little bit of weight or he is in better shape, is that going to give him better hands? Is that going to help him throw the ball, more accurately? You're sighing at me, Amy. What's going on?
I feel like these guys are damned if they do, damned if they don't. If he doesn't change anything, then it's on him for, wow, you didn't do anything in the offseason. Way to go. Now we're just going to continue last year. If he does change it, it's like, great, he changed it. Now what's he going to blow? And it's like, this is going to carry into some of the stuff we'll probably talk about in our next episode and throughout the season. But like, it's like these guys can't win, and it goes back to like, do you even like baseball? Like, isn't this supposed to be fun? Like, do you even like baseball, bro? Like, be happy this guy, like, he's doing his best. Like, if we had all-star teams for every team, how, like, the sport would be so different. But like, he's a good third baseman. Did he have some challenges last year? Yes. Was I one of the people who was frustrated with him? Yes. But I also can't get out there and do that. There is an elite group of people who can go out there and play 162 plus games every year. And he does his best. And he doesn't even have, I don't think, as many errors as everybody. I haven't fact checked that. So, I can dive into the stats if we need to. But I just, like, he's not going to win no matter what. Because no matter what he does, somebody's going to have something critical to say.
So how much is this much ado about nothing in the fact that we have to have some sort of content because it's spring training. They all reported early because of the Korea series. We don't have games. We don't have anything else to talk about. And maybe there's just people, it's like, I can't write another Shohei story of him taking batting practice. Like, I love, Juan Toribio he's great. He's the beat writer for the Dodgers for MLB.com. I look at his timeline on social media and compare it to other beat writers who will tell you Shohei took 3 steps, from here to here. And you don't see any of that on Toribio. I feel like Toribio just sits there and goes, I refuse to engage in this. I refuse to be a part of this. So how much is this is like, hey, let's write something about Muncy. We haven't heard about Muncy lately.
But I guess I would counter that with, why does it always have to feel negative? Why do we always have to pick at these guys? Like, can't we celebrate them because they are going out there day after day to play this game? Like, we can't find positive things to say about these guys. Do we even enjoy this game, or is this what baseball has become? We're just going to pick at it over and over again. Because for me, I want it to be fun.
You bet. That's an interesting point. So this story in particular, we're talking about Muncy being in physical condition. Is that a positive or a negative story?
I think it's how you spin it, because Doc's saying he's in great shape. The infielders have been raving about him. He believes Muncy can be an above average third baseman this year. You can take that and you can write a great story off of that in a positive way. Or you can take that and you can make it negative. Like, okay, well, his season last year wasn't great. Like, I mean, we're seeing it, right? But like, or we could, hey, this guy's putting in a lot of work. Like, he made a point in the offseason to focus on his mobility, more flexibility. He heard the fans, he heard the negative stuff. He's going out there and trying to be the best version of himself that he can be with the body he has, with the skill set he has. Can't we hold that up?
It's really interesting because the minute that you brought this up, I realized this is a positive story, and I think I'm the one that just made it negative by sitting there going, well, why did he? Because you're right. Both you and I thought he was in good shape already, decent shape. He does look different on TV. You're absolutely right. But this should be a positive story. It's Muncy coming in here, showing his dedication, showing his, like, he takes the offseason seriously and he's ready and he wants to be better. This should be a positive story. But here I am turning it into all about, like, he sucked defensively last year.
But it's not just you. Dive into the comments on any of the beat writers' posts, and it's a lot of people shitting on Muncy. Like, or we can just, like, he's the third baseman we have. Hope we have guys that can spell him, and this is how we're going forward. And he put in the work, and hopefully it pays off.
All right, so let's segue. I know I thought we were going to spend all our time talking about Walker Buehler, and here we're finally getting to Walker Buehler. So,
it was his day off, news-wise too.
So the news that came out was, and it came out I think this weekend, was that Walker Buehler is not going to be pitching in spring training, and immediately I don't know if this can be. I know it's news in the traditional sense, Amy, but could it be? Is it surprising at all? Because I know you and I have talked about this when everybody was talking about how great the Dodgers rotation is going to be. And I'm like, hold up. You can't count on Buehler because, first of all, Buehler was supposed to come back at the end of last season. And then what happened? They shut him down. All right. Well, now we had already heard, well, he's probably going to start the season on the IL.
It's
And
not
now we're getting
surprising because it takes about 18 months to heal from Tommy John. So if he had come back last year, it would have been at about 12 months, not the typical 18 that they give. So just to throw that out there for context.
well, yeah, and now we're being told he's not even going to pitch in spring training. Now, if you believe this, I have not seen it reported by any of the beat writers, but there are some people out there reporting that Walker Buehler's fastball was at 90. Now, if he's still recovering, if that's the reason why they don't want him to pitch, they still want him to continue focus on being built up. This is the kind of stuff that, again, when everybody is so excited about the Dodgers season, they signed all these players. There are no guarantees in this, right? That the Dodgers are going to win the World Series. And it's because Walker Buehler is my number one example. They are depending on Walker Buehler to make contributions to this team this year. But health, we don't know that he's going to be that Walker Buehler from 2018. Like that Walker Buehler in 2018 was throwing like 97, right? If he can't do that, he's got to find a completely different way to pitch, a completely different way to get hitters out. And that to me is something to keep an eye on. Like, how long is it going to take? Maybe Walker Buehler is a slow healer. Like, this is his second Tommy John. So that's why whenever I hear everybody was like, oh, well, Kershaw, they're all convinced that Kershaw's going to come back. And it's just like, guys, look at Walker Buehler. Like Kershaw, yeah, Kershaw could come back, but nothing is guaranteed because the line keeps getting pushed back on Walker Buehler.
But is it getting pushed back or did they fast forward it? Because if we're looking at 18 months from the time he had surgery, I think he had it in like what, September? Don't quote me, but it's like 18 months would be around March. Let's say it was September. That's March, which is about when they're slating him. They said they're prioritizing him for the postseason and later months of the season versus the early months. So if he comes back, April, May, that's about on par with the recovery and ramping back up and not potentially injuring him again. Because as we know, there's been a couple pitchers that have had successful careers after a second Tommy John, and there's some that don't. So wouldn't you want them to be a little bit careful? I think we might have just gotten a little excited about him coming back, and we don't want it to be too soon. So I think that just comes down to expectations. They're saying he's throwing the ball well, while unlikely to make that Cactus League start. Like, he's still ahead of schedule and seemingly has no issues. Of course, we know that can be a broad catch-all for anything, but if we are to believe what they're saying, then he may not be in spring training, but they're still ramping him up.
I think it's just one of those things. It serves as a reminder that nothing is set in stone. That even though we get these updates, and then of course the fans get upset when all of a sudden things change. That's what happens. Like, things are subject to change. I think we lose sight of the fact that things are subject to change. So yeah, okay.
You mean because they're human? Okay.
Yeah, don't bring that in here. Wait. No, these people
don't talk that trash.
Exactly. Don't talk that. How dare you? How dare you? So it doesn't concern you. It doesn't phase you at all when you heard that he wasn't going to pitch in any spring training games.
To me, it made sense based on the projections that we've heard for other players over time. Would I want him to? Sure. But I also don't want to bring him back and injure him so that, he can't pitch for the rest of the season. If it takes ramping him up, like, I never counted him in as the starting rotation when the season started to begin with. So for me, I had no expectation. There's no disappointment. As long as he comes back, and if they're projecting potentially April or May, to me, that seems realistic, and he's still going to be there for the majority of the season. So I guess I just don't see a problem.
After look, I think he was already in play to begin with to make the starting rotation, at least at the beginning of the year. But I think with this news, I think it's a done deal that Emmett Sheehan is going to be in the Dodgers starting rotation to begin the season. I think you are looking at Yamamoto, you're looking at Glasnow, you're looking at Bobby Miller, you're looking at Paxton, and then you're looking at Emmett Sheehan. And then the interesting thing is are they going to go to a 6-man rotation? For Yamamoto, I think a lot of it is going to depend on the schedule, but you have guys like Ryan Yarbrough and Michael Grove in the bullpen, I believe, at the beginning of the season that could give you a 6 start where those two guys will piggyback. We saw them do that last year.
I was going to say, we're no stranger to bullpen games or, just piggybacking and kind of stacking it.
Yeah. So I think the question you're going to be asking yourself is who's going to make a start first, Walker Buehler or Clayton Kershaw?
I would say Buehler. I think Kershaw again. I think that's us getting a little optimistic. If he's coming back from surgery, I think that is going to be later in the season. Like I hope Buehler would be more recovered by that point and already be pitching. But again, if we're slow ramping him up, he may not be pitching full games. Maybe he gets paired with Yarbrough and we piggyback those two. You never know.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get many innings in terms per game from Buehler, but it's one of those things, and maybe the Dodgers already knew this, and this is why I applaud them. The fact that they went and they got Yamamoto because getting Glasnow was fantastic, right? And I'm very excited because when we hear these stories that Buehler's that he's throwing 90, but then we hear these stories that Glasnow is hitting like 98, 99 at the beginning of spring training. The fact that they need Yamamoto, they need Glasnow because you have this uncertainty with the rest of the pitching staff. James Paxton is a guy who has a history of injuries. Yeah, it's not arm injuries. So, and maybe Gavin Stone is also in play because I still think Gavin Stone is going to start in the minor leagues. But with the Walker Buehler news, I think now Gavin Stone, if he has a good spring, he might end up getting a little more consideration to be pitching in this rotation.
Which is why the starting rotation was a huge concern of mine at the end of last season and going into the offseason because our team did a great job, but they limped along. We limped along to 100 wins, but we put a lot of band-aids on that. And some of those guys are out of play. Like we don't have a Tony Gonsolin. We don't have Clayton Kershaw to help lift them up at the beginning of the season. So hoping that the pieces that they have grabbed to bolster us at least till, Buehler can come back full steam. That's hopefully going to work out because we do have Yamamoto and Glasnow now.
Look, I believe in giving people their flowers when they deserve their flowers. And I know I already did this, but I'll do it again. The fact that the Dodgers went out and signed Yamamoto and gave him that money, good for them because I think in prior years or other Dodgers front offices, that wouldn't have happened. There was a story that came out today that the Phillies had offered Yamamoto more money in more years, but Yamamoto wanted to come here to the Dodgers, which I think is very encouraging. I applaud them making those moves of getting Yamamoto and Glasnow and hopefully those are pitchers that the Dodgers they're treating them as their one and their number 2 pitchers, and hopefully they pitch like that the whole year because I'm not going to say I am concerned about Walker Buehler yet because you explained it to me. You talked me off the ledge. Everything you said makes sense, Amy. 18 months. Let's go with the original plan. But it is something that's caught my attention, and I am keeping my eye out on him to see when is he going to actually start getting, pitching in games and ramping up. And maybe they are trying to buy him extra time because they're going to give these young guys a shot in the rotation early in the season. It's all things that we're going to be able, as you say, to keep an eye on the telenovela that is todo your baseball.
Well, and I think that's something to remember too, that it comes down to having those good fits. And I think we're going to cover more of that on our next episode, but why it's so important for like potentially Yamamoto turning down more money to come to the Dodgers, like getting those people that fit the clubhouse, fit the culture, so that you do have that go forward and that cohesiveness. And I really hope that this really is just giving Walker a rest, and he's going to come back and be better than ever because he got that full rehab time that he needed.
Well, Amy, you don't got to go home, but you got to get the hell out of here. Is there anything else that you want to say before we end the show?
Go Dodgers. That's it.
All
That's
right.
all I got.
So again, if you're listening to us on the audio, please make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. Follow us on our social media. On X, we are at BB Shangri-La. On Instagram, Threads, and Twitch, we are at Baseball Shangri-La. If you're watching us on the YouTube and you've gotten this far and you still haven't subscribed, here is your reminder. Make sure you subscribe again. She is Amy Cuevas. I am Juan Ramirez. You have been listening, watching to another episode of Baseball Shangri-La. Amy, say goodbye to the people.
Bye.
Adios.